and welcome. Before we start the actual recording, I've made a slight error. Impossible, you might say. But unfortunately, I've now discovered my microphone is dead. That's why you might hear in this show slight recordings. I never realised it. I only looked at it today, and now I have a dead microphone. Microphone no more. But it won't stop me. That will not stop me, ladies and gentlemen. I will be returning. Yes. So listen to this show. It's very interesting. I apologize about the reverb. It sounds it's the microphone. It wasn't me. There we are. Welcome. Welcome to the guest show. This week I'm very honored. I've been out. I could say outmanned, but that'd be sexist. Is outwomaned? Yes, I'm outwomaned. I have three charming young ladies. I call everybody young because at my age, even Methuselah is young now. Today I have three people representing an amazing organisation who have become big players, I think, in the homeless world, the Centre for Homeless Impact. I have the manager, Jen, and two of her lived experience people, Cristina and Anne. Now, I've spoken enough, as people know, so I'm going to pass it to Jen first. What are we going to talk about, Jen?
Hi, Ian. Thanks for having us on the show. So, as Ian says, my name is Jen, and I work at the Centre for Homelessness Impact. So, I work as an implementation lead. So, I work with a mixture of people in local authorities and communities. But in particular, I'm really privileged to look after our fairly new lived experience network. So, this is a team of people who've found out about the centre through different projects and things that we've done over the last few years, and who want to support our mission to make homelessness rare, brief, and non recurring. So we want to end homelessness, but we also want to be really clear about what that looks like so that we can actually make it happen rather than just use it as a kind of, sort of platitude. What we're going to be talking about today, with the help of Anne and Cristina, who are two of our associates at the centre, is co production. And what does it really mean? How do you really make it work? What are the kind of good and bad practices that are going on in co-production in the sector at the moment? And what can we advise people to do if people are thinking about bringing co-production into their services for the first time? So we're going to be sharing reflections from some of the work that we've been doing at the centre, but we're also going to be sharing reflections from what we've kind of seen and heard and experienced in other aspects of the work that we do. And that's really it.
Well, as I said to you before, I'm involved in an organisation called Expert Link, run by an excellent gentleman called David Ford, who there's long stories how I met David. I've been on several of his panels. Jen's met him. And that organisation actually did two things. It introduced me to the power of co-production, but also introduced me to the power of lived experience voices. Even though as a writer, I've always been interested in real voices. And I love when you said about the mistakes are made, the interpretation of co-production, Jen. I mean, that I see. I've been involved in several advice. People come to me advice setting up how can we bring co-production here? A theatre company, Cardboard Citizens asked me about it because I'd worked with them. And I said, in pure terms, as a show, as a director and a performer, it doesn't work. You must have, in my belief, one director in theatre. But as a tool for communication, it works. And that's what I said to him at the time. So please carry on, James. I've spoke too much.
Thanks, Ian. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, co-production, because I think, as you have sort of hinted at, it's become a little bit of a buzzword in the sector over the last few years. I remember working perhaps like in the mental health sector sort of 12, 15 years ago, and co-production wasn't something that was really talked about, whereas now it's talked about absolutely everywhere, in the homelessness sector, in adult services, in children's services, in mental health as well. And it's talked about so much that sometimes we actually don't talk about what it actually means and what it actually looks like. And there's a little bit of, I think, a sort of panic going on of like, if we're not doing co-production, then we must be doing co-production. It's something that we have to do to look like we're up to date and we're doing things right. And I think sometimes in a very sort of stretched sector like the homelessness sector, the kind of rush to do it and also to be looking like you're doing it sometimes gets away in the way a little bit of actually making it as good as it can be, making it effective, considering things like goals, methods, how people feel when they're invited to be involved in a co-production space. So the approach that we took when we started to talk about doing a bit more of this at the Centre for Homelessness Impact is that with the people who'd come together to join our lived experience network, we sat down and we spent a lot of time discussing in different ways what have people experienced before, what's worked, what has been a good experience, what's led to good outcomes, asking some of the kind of hard questions around co-production and lived experience involvement, and being really open to what everybody wanted to share and their perspectives on that. Because our ethos is that we don't want to re-traumatize people by making mistakes that people have already experienced elsewhere, or similar mistakes to what people have already experienced elsewhere. We want to learn from our own experience, but also others' experience, so that when we set something up, we're using all of the best knowledge that we've got to hand from our sort of collective experiences. So, Cristina, do you want to share a little bit about what we've been talking about during the last few months?
Yes, sorry, I raised my hand because I think it's important to specify at this from the very beginning that the way we thought about organizing our conversations as people with lived experiences, first of all, was as a space that was safe for people with lived experiences to open up about, accessing services and, the work, as also the charities, which includes charities, social enterprises, government services and whatever, and just having like a reflection on those experiences away from in a space where there is no judgment and also away from the interference of those organizations without the fear of repercussions because often you might find or fear that if you give them a negative feedback, the support that you're relying on is going to be withdrawn, and it threatens basically your lifeline.
Can sorry,
And yeah,
to ask a question. It's a very interesting phrase you use. If you give negative feedback, you stated, I must admit, my belief is that any feedback with a negative, whether it might be termed negative or positive, should be heard. Okay.
yes, it should be.
Are you
But
sometimes you feel it wasn't heard?
in the case of charities or organizations that offer service and support for the homeless, there is absolutely no true way for the service users to safely raise critique or be in any ways negative, and also there is no accountability. Like if you're in a situation where somebody is in a position of power, because that's what the power imbalance is when you're accessing a service, they got the power to give you the help or not, or whatever. And if there is, we do often experience abuse, abusive behavior of people that work in these organizations. There is absolutely no way for us to actually address that. There is no accountability, there's no systems. There hasn't even got to be. Some charities, sometimes they're supposed to follow some guidelines in terms of safeguarding, but they're guidelines.
Mm.
And it is only for charities that these guidelines exist. Social enterprises, there is nothing. They're actually, completely free from having any system that would hold them accountable for anything at all. They don't even have to say how they use the money that they're getting donated. Literally, there's no transparency at all. So as service users, often we find ourselves incapable of addressing any issues, or even having the space anyways to consider what is happening. So some of the people that took part in these conversations, they were being signposted to all sorts of services that really were not just completely useless for them in terms of resolving their situation and circumstance of precarious or not precarious housing, or not being housed. But they were also distracting them and taking time, from actually finding solutions that would have resolved their situation. So we find that people are paraded around charities as well as case studies. Anyway, that's true. We will probably go further into the
I will
conversation.
tell you something. Maybe I've been on a government panel, and that's through Expert Link. And we were talking originally about this idea of ending homelessness. Then the Kerslake report came out, no. But earlier on in the conversation, and I'm very into monitoring, how good the services, they were talking. Have you heard of what CQC is? I don't know if it's Centre Quality Control. It's more about homes, care homes and hospitals. They were talking about bringing something in. And I really think that should be brought into something like the homeless sector. I want to just say something that I've realised recently. When I got off the street and I heard about the homeless, as far as I was concerned, the only homeless people were rough sleepers. There are no other people that existed, which is wrong. We've now got quite a wide umbrella. We've got the sofa surfers. Temporary accommodation is homeless. If you're in a hostel, you're home. When I was in a hostel, I didn't consider myself homeless.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if I mentioned that. Now, Anne, please.
I just wanted to add to Christina's comments, because it's not just charities. It's, in my experience, statutory services are just as bad. And I've come across some charities who do great co-production, and who really do want to help to end homelessness for good. But statutory services don't have the housing to house people experiencing homelessness. So what I've discovered is they just try and blame people that they don't have housing for their circumstances, to make it easier for them to bear that they can't house them. And that's quite a problem in the area that I live. Sorry?
Where are you?
I'm in Cambridgeshire.
I've heard of it. Please go on, Anne.
Oh no, just that to bring us back to co-production. I think I've seen some really, really good co-production, and where that's happened, you know, it's been a really good two-way relationship that's been built up, and it's felt very empowering to be a part of. And I've made friends from the people from, you know, all walks of life where I've been involved in it. And I've seen some really bad and some quite ugly co-production as well, and that's re-traumatizing and exploitative, I think. And sadly, that's all too prevalent, actually, because it has become a fashion and everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon, and without really finding out what the best thing to do is and how to go about doing co-production in a productive way, in a healthy way. They just organizations just have a goal for what they want, and then they use people they're supposed to be doing co-production with to take information from them and then send them away. It's not a relationship at all. It's very transactional, a bit like, you know, buying a hot dog or something. And that's no way to treat people, actually, in my opinion.
Well, I before we go to Jen, as she wants to talk, I will share you a little tale. When COVID came, David formed this partnership. We call it the National Advisory Panel. It was people all over England, where no Scottish people were, to help the government look at the homeless. We got them to consider to put co-production in one of their things if you want funding. And one of our members, I was the only person who was the well-meaning amateur. I never worked for anybody. But there was one guy who worked for an organisation in Leeds, and he came and said, all the Leeds are putting for the money, they've done no work on co-production, I think. So it is a way of getting money. Jen, please.
Thanks, Ian. That's an excellent point. And I think Cristina also made a really excellent point around the fact that even where there should be accountability, there often isn't accountability. And so a big fear for people going into co-production, if they're using a service or they're getting something that they need from a service, is, will my entitlement, my service be affected? Even if not officially, then unofficially, because, you know, services are very stretched, people are very busy, and it's so easy if you've upset a member of staff for your needs or your application to be, you know, deprioritized to the bottom of the pile, and simply with the excuse, oh, we're very busy. So it might not be obvious when that's happening. It can be done in very subtle ways if you upset a member of staff when you're using a service. So that's a big obstacle that organizations need to get around, so that people can feel safe to get involved in co-production and feedback mechanisms. I want to talk a little bit about a point that Anne made as well, which is that actually there's a very, very broad spectrum of practice when it comes to co-production, ranging from some really excellent practice at one end of the spectrum to some really quite harmful and exploitative practices at the other. And one of the things that I'd like to sort of ask Anne and Cristina about from your experience is, what have you seen and what have we talked about? What's the indication that things are going wrong or that co-production has been done in a non-genuine way? What are some of the signs? Because at its heart, co-production should be quite simple. It's about people with lived experience and people who provide services or make decisions working together to make something happen. But what goes wrong in these spaces, and what sort of signs might you notice that something perhaps isn't being run in quite the way it should be run? Anne?
Well, when it comes to co-production, real power is sharing. And one of the signs that co-production is going wrong is where people in power can't share and they have to cling to their power. So instead of elevating the voice of lived experience and, you know, acknowledging ideas and then working on those ideas are either stifled because the person in power doesn't agree with them, dropped altogether, or reworked so that it becomes the idea of the person with the power. So, you know, good co-production conversation is completely lost. That's one thing.
Yeah, certainly. This is something that we've talked about before, isn't it? The person who's got the power in the room, the person who's often the salaried person, picking the ideas that they like, ignoring the ones that they don't, maybe not reporting or minuting some of the ideas that they don't like, and also like not acknowledging where ideas come from, perhaps not crediting the person that thought of an idea with that idea, but presenting it either as their own idea or something that emerged from the group when actually in reality it was one person's idea. So that's often quite a sign that things are going wrong and that it's not working as it should. Can you think of any signs, Cristina, where you've noticed where perhaps it's meant to be a listening environment and a sharing environment, but it's not being done in quite the right way?
Yeah, I think we were mentioning some examples. I feel like practical examples perhaps are easier to understand. Like, you know, when people give out questionnaires, and the questionnaire, so the questions are set. Obviously, we've all filled out these questionnaires. Where at the end of it, we realize actually I don't really have any. I don't even agree with what I said myself, because the questions are set in a way that it's impossible to, they guide you through a certain path to say something. So those, and in the same way, where there is those spaces that are structured, where the structure comes from above. So the agenda is set, and they just like want to ask some opinions or on certain topics. So there is no really, yeah, I think the power balance keeps on coming back here. Is like the power is held by the organizations, whoever is like organizing the co-production, that so they can validate their work. But the people with lived experiences, we're just there to tick the box and to say, yeah, co-production is happening. So that's and sometimes I'm taking part in one specific group that was supposed, they were trying to do the right thing, but ultimately they kind of fell back into this kind of structure where, the agenda is set for the people with lived experience, and we are being trained into being able to do things, to share our experience. We're being trained into being able to speak with organizations, and all this training as if we are children incapable of dealing with services that we have been dealing with all our lives because we depend on them. So yeah, and I feel those are very, very kind of typical examples. A good sign of co-production is when you kind of are given a space where there is no agenda, no structure, and you are given the space as a group to grow together, learn how to communicate, understand what your common values are, what you believe in, in a respectful way, in a safe environment, and really doing that groundwork to create a true, a truly communicative space.
I would say I'm trained when I was 16, they asked me why. I decided to become the best communicator in the world. I think I'm pretty good. A friend of mine down the market says I'm the best salesman he knows. No, I sell me first. And that's what's important. I like to think I can recognize the uniqueness in each because everybody's unique for some reason. The uniqueness in each individual I meet. No, I can continue to say I can think because I come across people. I'll show you a tale. I like stories. I'm into Native American shamanism. The guy introduced me to a great way with groups. He say, look around the group, look around the circle, see who you want to know, the people you really want to know. Now look at the people you don't want to know. Get to know them. They will teach you something. And how many times that has proven to be true? Because everybody is special in some. I meet guys and girls who are PIAs, pain in the asses, but there's something there. And I'm going to put an idea to all three of you. I've been discussing this actually. Because normally, you've already said it, the power is in the hands of the worker. Why not have one person? I'm not saying all, and I will say there has to be an agenda in meetings. You can't, even though this is a free-flowing interview, I've got an agenda. Yeah, number one, to stop the heat from killing me. Why not have a person who have lived experience run the meeting? And that's to all three of you. I'm putting this question to. There is a lot of fear there for people, I know.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think the difficulty is people with power who run the meetings don't want to let it go. And the thought that a person with lived experience might actually be able to run a meeting as well as them, that's threatening. And one of my other examples, the reason I raised my hand was because I wanted to use an example of where in a meeting somebody has found me threatening and simply ignored what I had to say. So I was invited to a meeting, I was invited to speak, so I gave my opinion, and then the person who asked me to speak just referred straight back to the person who'd spoken before me. And I was just left thinking, hang on a minute, did you actually listen to what I had to say? And my concern is that actually, yeah, they did. And it was just possibly too challenging for them. So they decided not to have heard it. And then I'm left in a meeting thinking, how do I react? Because it's, it would be rude for me to say, well, hang on a minute, you've just ignored me, because that would be disruptive to the meeting. So I think there's quite a lot of power dynamics that go on in meetings that are actually preventing people with lived experience from participating. And it would be a huge step to have a person with lived experience actually in charge. Although I think it's a great idea and I'm totally behind it.
So there is a negative side to my proposal. I don't know where that sound comes from. A negative side, before I bring Jen and Cristina in, is that not everybody can run a meeting. It takes many, many different skills to facilitate a meeting because, and even me, I'm fairly good at this. I want to say something. I want to say something in my head. I want to speak. I want to speak. Years ago, when I was a comedian, I'll be talking all the time, making jokes in an appropriate side. I've grown up now, but it's difficult. Jen, please.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I think one of the things that I feel quite strongly about is that actually having people with lived experience chair things isn't an antidote. It isn't like a magic wand that can solve power imbalances. So in the Centre for Homelessness Impact, currently about a third of our staff have lived experience of homelessness. And I've worked chairing groups where I have lots of personal experience with all the issues involved for quite some time. But that doesn't take away power imbalances. Once you are employed by an organisation, if the other people that are in the group are not employed by that organisation, you have got power in that room. Irrespective of whatever lived experience you might have, you still got power because you're still the person who has got a direct line to the organisation. You've got access to the things that the organisation provides for its staff. You've got probably more control over the budget than the people that you're working with in the room. And I think it takes an awful lot more to break down power imbalances than simply getting a quota of people with lived experience in your staff team and saying to those people, go and, run lived experience groups and coordinate lived experience groups. Because the other thing I think that happens sometimes is that when people have got lived experience themselves, they automatically think, well, I will get this right because I've got lived experience, I've got empathy, I've been through it. When the reality is that everybody's been through really different, diverse experiences. And if you think you know it all, you stop listening, you stop having the ability to be changed by other people, you lose your ability to grow and to understand things that perhaps you didn't understand before. And I think, in a sense, it's not the most important factor whether you've got lived experience. The most important factors are your openness, your willingness to reflect, to grow, to analyze, to ask yourself really difficult questions. The most difficult question I ask of myself on a regular basis is, this person is annoying me, or I'm feeling impatient. Why am I feeling impatient? And turning that question back on myself to interrogate my own feelings about why this person is pushing my buttons or why I'm feeling impatient in a scenario. And what my lived experience doesn't make me immune from those feelings. And if I wasn't willing to interrogate myself and was just thinking, oh, well, I'm going to get it right because I've got lived experience, then I would stop learning and I'd become a very closed-minded facilitator. So I think there's an awful lot more to it, as you've alluded to, Ian, than just getting people with lived experience into positions where they facilitate groups. What are your thoughts, Cristina?
Well, I'm going to just interrupt what I do at the end of every day, because as you all know, I'm perfect. I review. It comes from my days training as a counsellor, but I don't do it in written form because I've got an almost perfect. I have got an almost perfect memory. Don't remember names, but I remember facts. I always say, what have I done today? What have I learnt? I do not judge whether it's positive or negative, but it's what I learn, because I learn every day. And that's hard for a lot of people. Cristina, please.
Yeah. So I feel that inviting a person with lived experience, or even asking them to chair a meeting with all the people with lived experiences about something that a company wants to find out, is hardly an example of co-production. If it's very dismissing as well. Like if you have like a whole strategy for example, an organization, it would have taken quite a long time for the organization to like come up with a strategy, different people contributing with ideas, all the research and whatever else that would have happened. And then you expect the person with lived experience to just come in a meeting about and present them a question, and have an opinion on something that they've just kind of, it's just been dropped on them like that. So it's like co-production requires people with lived experience to work as part of the organization, as an integral part of the work that takes part before the meetings, and also having people with a variety of experiences who have also got the capacity to be able to deal with that. Because as well, it is a difficult type of work, and I feel that emotionally people need to be prepared as well, and feel and feel and learn to be able to communicate with each other as a group. And I do feel that, it is important as well that people with lived experience are given their own space to discuss things that, with regards to what the plans that the organization and whatever has got in mind between themselves. And so when they do attend meetings, it is the voice of the group that also gets represented, not just a singular person opinion, because not every one of us who has got lived experience knows that not one experience is the same. It's like we're not a homogeneous group, that has got the same idea, experience. It's a very varied group, and at the end of the story, we're all humans, and we should be respected as such. I wanted to just go back in terms of this. About what Anne said in terms of service users becoming, having to carry the burden for the failures of services and organizations, for the services being inadequate and inaccessible for the people that they are supposed to be supporting. And often people who have work experience themselves, who end up working for these organizations, they get institutionalized into victim blaming. And so that's another further barrier that we need to break when we are working with co-production, because we're always seen as some kind of like we are to be blamed for our own circumstances. And so our voice doesn't really matter as much.
Thank you. Jen, got your hand up.
Yeah, lots to think about there, Cristina. And I think a really important point is that the best co-production that I've seen and been involved in starts with conversations. It is the stuff that happens before the meeting, because once the meeting is being called, there's already an agenda, there's already a goal, and it's actually in the goal setting, in those safe spaces where the conversations occur, that actually inform what the goals of co-production should be. Because you have to have a goal for co-production, because, to put it bluntly, you're not co-producing, well, you're not producing anything. So how can you be co-producing when you're not producing? If you know there's no goal and no endpoint, you're not actually making anything, which you need to be doing to co-produce. But actually, it is having those conversations where the goals can emerge, and it's questions like what are the main priorities for getting things right in this area? What's missing from current provision? And it's having those more open conversations that then allow the goals to be set, and then the kind of the co-production, which is a little bit more kind of focused, can begin. But if there isn't consultation and conversation around what the goals should be, then it becomes a very unbalanced sort of scenario where an organization has decided what the goal should be, and then it's basically saying to a group of people who probably know better what the goal should be, can you come and help us achieve our goals? And it's like, well, yeah, but actually, why not consult on what the goals should be? What are your thoughts on this, Anne?
Yeah, I think that what you and Cristina have to say is pure gold. And I just wanted to add to that and say, I see co-production as a journey, and it starts at the beginning when everybody gets in the room together and there is no agenda, and you create the agenda together. And I think that services need to be open to changing their services to fit the needs of their customers, who are the people with lived experience, not changing their customers to fit the services they're providing at the moment. And that's a way round that we've got things. And to agree with Cristina completely about, we need to grow emotionally intelligently. I think as people, we're not ever going to be able to improve our relationships or our services unless we're prepared to go on a personal journey of growth. And that involves listening to other people, being concerned about other people. And that involves, including people with lived experience in that. Because I think largely when it comes to homelessness as an issue, people who've experienced homelessness are seen as our scapegoats. They're society's scapegoats. And I would really love to see the issue of homelessness become a protected characteristic in the same way that sexism and racism has been, because wherever possible, we like to blame people who have lived experience of homelessness for their circumstances and say, well, it's your poor choices, you did it to yourself. And there's no element of understanding that actually it's systems failure that has created a situation where people lose the roof over their head, which is actually scandalous when it comes to our societal values.
Jen.
Yeah, fantastic point, Sam. And I think a big issue that both you and Cristina touched upon is that whereas when we're talking about, say, protected characteristics and the rights of different groups, we talk quite a lot about solidarity and allyship and creating those spaces which are just protected for people who've got those protected characteristics to come together and strategize a little bit and say, okay, what are we all experiencing and how should we use that time in that meeting, and coming to those kind of collective decisions. And I don't think we really build it into co-production, certainly not in the homelessness sector as a rule, but I think it's really important that we start doing it. Often what you see is one person who has got lived experience being kind of like taken along to a meeting that's absolutely chock full of paid professionals. I shouldn't really say that, because often the people with the lived experience are just as professional as everyone else, but it's the language that you slip into. But basically everyone else is salaried, and then you've got the person who wears the lived experience hat in that scenario, and that's a really intimidating, potentially isolating experience. And sometimes it allows people who've got the power to kind of, sort of put that person in a bit of a corner. They've got potentially some imposter syndrome going off, and it's very choreographed. Like, you can have that person there, you can have this many people in this group, you can speak to, in the meeting for this amount of time, but then you've all got to go home again. And I think one of the things that has kind of made our approach quite different is really carving out spaces for that allyship to grow, for people to come together and strategize a bit, for people to have unguarded conversations around meetings as well as just being in the meeting. Because we can never have a successful way of co-producing if we're afraid of people, and we're afraid of people's experiences, and we're afraid of people's views. Until we can really be open to hearing people's experiences and what everybody actually thinks about us and the things that we're doing, then we're not doing it right, are we? So there's a real need for openness around this.
And one last point, because this is an incredibly fascinating conversation, but I'm not Joe Rogan.
Just to say, I agree with Jen again. She's absolutely right. Sometimes I've been in meetings and I felt like the mascot. I felt like the lived experience mascot for the group, pat me on the head. And, when I lost the roof over my head, I didn't lose my ability to think and make decisions and have opinions. And yet I'm sort of led to feel that I did, because other people treat me as if I did. And, I go into meetings, and sometimes I've got more qualifications and life experience than the people in the meetings that are treating me like I'm 3 years old and asking me to sit in the corner. And that's quite hard to take sometimes. And I really wish there was more openness, because it's only through, seeing each other as human beings that we can make any headway.
Cristina, one last, because this will be the last point.
Yeah, I think I wanted to kind of bring in some reality of what is, the situation as well for homelessness, and for example, and actually connecting to that conversation we were having with Nicola about children in care, because everything is connected really, because it is systems of oppression and state violence against the most vulnerable in society. Statistically, children that end up in care are often children of disabled people. So people have got a disability. Often, I was just at a talk here in Manchester with the Greater Manchester Action Network for Homelessness. Is moms escaping domestic violence who get their kids taken away by social services because they're homeless. Because actually women escaping domestic violence often have to flee their home, and the perpetrator keeps the home. Contrary to what society usually kind of thinks that so there is all these, and then the children end up into care, and most likely they will continue to experience homelessness throughout their lives because of the lack of support, the mental health, the trauma that causes. It's difficult to access education and to actually get out of this cycle where you're constantly kind of, in this very, very precarious kind of space of human condition. So I feel that that's often forgotten when we're talking about homelessness and people with lived experience. It is about people's lives, and the most vulnerable in society that are not supported. And then the other thing that I really wanted to make a point about is that at the end of the story, yes, services are bad, but I feel that as individuals, and that's probably why people with lived experiences are always very uncomfortable to have in a room, because at the end of the story, it is also about human connection. And when you are working on the front line, to see a person as some kind of dehumanized blob that is just an addict or somebody that is rough sleeping or something else, to be able to actually relate to that person as a human being, and not to say, well, the service is bad, this person is unmanageable, they are behaving in a way that I'm uncomfortable with and I perceive as dangerous, so I'm just going to throw them back on the street until they sort themselves out. That's not okay. And that's also for us individuals, to take responsibility for that and change our mindset from the very groundwork.
Thank you, Cristina. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to bring this. I'm going to ask you to come back to continue this. This is definitely a two-parter. You're right. Actually, one of the theories Nicola spoke to me one day is how many people are homeless now, adults, were homeless as a children. I don't have facilities to research that sort of thing. Unfortunately, research, anyone who does it knows, takes about 15 different mazes. But I do think that people are. I'll leave you one final story. Went to a museum about, must be 3 weeks ago. And I really went there to see Nicola. She was down in London. But I also had to speak to the museum back when they were coming home. As I walked into their garden, they've got a beautiful place in Finsbury Park. How many just go there? It's amazing. They do regular tours. Fantastic place. They don't have a homeless person, a little shell say, this person's homeless, it's different. But you'll hear more about their work when they come on. As I came in, there was someone said, Mr. Cowman, Mr. Cowman. Not many refer to me as my surname. Not many people know my surname. He was a guy I met the first time I went to Lincoln's Inn in 2006. Now that first year I was on the street, he'd been in and out of places. He still remembered me. And we spoke about it. And we're talking about this thing of being pigeonholed. He'd like to get off the street. He's been off several times more. I now know the reason why. He said he let go in his conversation. Bills got too much for him. We're not trained to handle bills as children. I wasn't. But there's so many things you have to realize how vital the voices of all of you are, whether professional or non-professional. It doesn't matter. Enough for my sermon for the week, for this one, but I want to say thank you, all three of you. I've learned such a lot myself. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what this podcast is about. It's not about me preaching. Listen to Friday. I preach on Friday. I talk about news, and when you spoke about politicians, all I could think was Suella Braverman in my background, and everybody knows I hate her. But it's not about that. It's about the little lessons that people like these people can show you to consider it. Now, in the future, I've got organizations and individuals coming up. I have no problem with that. I think we can learn from everybody. So if you're interested, please join my mailing list. It's slowly growing. It's actually grown quite a bit since I came out of hospital 6 weeks ago. Really shocked. But also you have a chance, if you have a story, to come on and talk about it. I will say I won't take everybody. I had one person, I should share this, came on, he wanted to talk about the DWP monitoring of people. That's when they were advertising, they were turning papers about people looking at your bank accounts. In reality, they've always had that power. They could be under danger to the country act, something like that. But then he said, I want to talk about 100,000 deaths that have been caused by it. I couldn't allow that. Now, I'm pretty sure there are some deaths that are caused by the stress of being. I don't think it's that many. But I'm not going to proliferate fear. So if you're going to come to me with a story, ladies and gentlemen, I said to him, I want documented proof of this. Because I have to look at my reputation, the podcast reputation. But I want to say thank you again, all three of you. And if you want to contact me, you contact my email, which at present would be my personal one, iankalman@gmx.com. That's Ian is spelled IANKALMAN, India Alpha November, Kilo Alpha Lima, Mike Alpha November. You won't believe how many people misspell my surname. I'm not surprised. But thank you very much and have a good week.